Listen, I know that when you come to my channel, you are expecting me to talk about movies or TV shows, which are typically the two main things I talk about on this channel. But I've always said this on this channel, and that is this channel isn't just about movies and TV shows. It's about media in general. So, I mean, I could also talk about music. I just don't talk about music all that often, but I could if I wanted to. But there's also another piece of media that comes very close to cinema and films in general, and that is the video game industry. And recently, something came up, a game came up that I was very interested in playing. And then after I have played it, I can officially say that this is one of the games that I'm probably going to put up on an echelon of some of probably the best games I've ever played. It's amongst that echelon of greatest games I've ever played. And honestly, there's no other way to put it. It's 007 First Light. So I think it's without saying that we needed a new entry in the 007 franchise. I mean, I have to say it like this. This is probably the best game since Everything or Nothing. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Everything or Nothing was a game that came out back on the PS2 and GameCube. So just so you can sort of understand when in the timeline this is. I mean, we're talking about, like, technically speaking, almost 3 generations ago. Just think about that. We had the PS3, the PS4, and now we're on the PS5. And now we get a game that is better than that. So, like, just picture that for a second. I mean, I know you're probably going to mention, either Bloodstone or 007 Legends, which was a game that came out. I didn't play those games. I personally didn't play those games. But I'm pretty sure the general audience would say that between 007 Legends and Bloodstone and this is probably the best game you could possibly ask for when it comes to 007 and understanding James Bond as a whole. And for me personally, it was interesting to experience this game because it tells you the very beginning of who James Bond is. And mind you, this is a game that was being constructed very carefully, like with the people who are involved with the movies, and ultimately the Ian Fleming estate. Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond himself, that is the core element of who James Bond is. And they essentially designed this game to be something that was, as core element to James Bond as possible. So for me personally, going through this experience from beginning to end and seeing the progression of who James Bond was at the very beginning up until who he is at the end, where ultimately he becomes 007. And finding out how he becomes 007 is even the more interesting part to me. I think that it's incredibly well structured. It's incredibly cinematic. This is a game that's very cinematic in its storytelling and allowing the player to actually feel like James Bond rather than it just being another shooter or another, action game that just feels like they slapped the James Bond name on. This doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like an afterthought. It feels like they put thought into every intricate detail this game has. And ultimately, when you play through it, you understand why that is. So, honestly, IO Interactive has literally blown me away with their, nuances and essences and being able to actually put something together that is absolutely breathtaking. And that kind of seeps into also the casting of this game as well. I'm going to just preliminarily saying, Lenny James is here, Lenny Kravitz is here as well, Gemma Chan, Noemi Nakai, who are brilliant actors. All 4 that I just mentioned are absolutely brilliant. You have Priyanka Burford as M, who's absolutely amazing as well in this casting. Kiara Lester, who plays Moneypenny. Honestly, every single choice that they chose to use for this game is absolutely amazing. I mean, Alistair McKenzie playing Q. I mean, like his little nuances as well. I mean, I understand that for some people it may be strange to look at all these actors and see them in the game and be like, I don't know, maybe I would change this, or maybe I would do that, or maybe this is what I would do. I mean, you have to like understand a lot about James Bond in order to cast these people here. I mean, IO Interactive may have like chosen these people, but ultimately the approval came from, the Ian Fleming estate, the people behind James Bond. MGM had to approve these people to be these characters, and ultimately they embody the core elements of these characters. So I mean, like every single person. I mean, Lenny Kravitz as Bama. I mean, he's incredible. Like he's not there for the entire game, but for the section that he is there, he steals the scenes that he's in. He's absolutely amazing in this game. I mean, Lenny James being Greenway in this game is absolutely amazing from beginning to end. It's so well intricately casted that you're almost like asking yourself, like, you could easily make a movie out of this. Now, mind you, we'll talk about that a little later. But every single person here is amazing. And I'm just talking about the people who are helping James Bond along the way and playing these roles surrounding James Bond. I haven't even gotten to James Bond yet. And I believe wholeheartedly what I'm about to say. This was possibly the best casting to James Bond in a really long time. Because ultimately the only like version of James Bond that we have known, other than say Pierce Brosnan, who did like 3 games, Pierce Brosnan was the symbol of the Bond games for a really long time. And then obviously you have Bloodstone that came along, and I think that was Daniel Craig that was involved in that project. But ultimately it follows those moments, and I have to say, like, I truly wholeheartedly believe Patrick Gibson is easily the best Bond we've had in a really long time. I mean, him growing from that one Bond that we see at the very beginning of the game all the way up until the very end of the game is the natural progression that you expect to see in a character. And ultimately, his story is so well told in this game. It's not something that skips. Like, there's no moment in this game where you're like, oh, we're going to skip through all of this part just to get to that. No. The story that is being told with him is very intricate and slow. And I mean, you not slow paced. The pacing is great, but it's nice and well paced. So you understand these moments that he's going through. You understand his mentality. You understand his motives to get past certain obstacles in this story. So I think Patrick Gibson plays every single one of these moments to precision, to absolute precision. And honestly, something that came up in my mind when I first saw his picture as James Bond, which obviously is his likeness, mind you. Majority of the people who you see in this game, Lenny Kravitz, Gemma Chan, Naomi Nakai, Lenny James, all these people have their likeness in the game. So, mind you, when I saw his likeness in the game with the hair, because mind you, he doesn't have that dark hair, he's a bit of a ginger in real life. And I'm talking about Patrick Gibson, obviously. But when I saw him with that hair and the way he looked, he immediately gave me young Roger Moore vibes. And I'm even going to put it side by side so you can see here. He actually looks like a young Roger Moore, which kind of falls into the area and sort of the mindset of who they want you to imagine him as. So I feel like, I don't know if it was deliberate. I don't know if it's because they looked at him and thought, let's look back at like old Bonds and see who he looks most like. And then when they saw the young Roger Moore photo, they were like, oh, we need to get this guy right now. Because all of this could lead up to that. All of this could be like, oh, he's just a younger version of Roger Moore's character. But ultimately, it wouldn't work due to the timeline, because Roger Moore was more, back in the day, 70s, 60s, that sort of era of James Bond, and now he's playing in a more modern sense. So timeline-wise, it wouldn't work, but he is easily the best choice to play Bond in this game. And honestly, he is phenomenal, and I have no other words to describe it other than it was an absolute pleasure to see him acting in this game. And I have to give it also a huge shout out in the soundtrack department, because the soundtrack to this game is absolutely amazing. Amazing. Action sequences really pump up with the orchestra, and obviously this game is very careful about where it uses the tiny nuances of James Bond's theme. Now, mind you, because James Bond in this game is not officially James Bond until the very end of the game, you never really hear the James Bond theme until the very end of the game. But you do catch little nuances, little trickles here and there of the sound. It's worked into the song, it's worked into the actual soundtrack, but it's so subtle and so soft in that soundtrack that you're like, oh, they're like giving us little clues along the way. They never truly play the sound and the actual theme until the very end, when he actually becomes 007, which I think was a very smart move on the game directors to actually do that and push forward that sort of like little nuance other than actually playing the sound, because ultimately it's when he becomes 007 that I think that was like the crescendo to play that song. So I think they nailed it in that department. Now, something I do have to give the game developers a huge thumbs up for, a giant double thumbs up for, is including elements of James Bond that most people would be like, that wouldn't work in today's day and age. No, they followed through with the actual essence of who James Bond is. So, ultimately you'd think like, oh, he's gonna play a little bit, misogynistic or that sort of thing, and he doesn't play like that. He's very charming, and he's a ladies' man. So I mean, it leans a lot into who James Bond is. He's got that sort of slyness, that sort of like charisma. Like his Riz factor is through the roof. That's what I'm trying to get at here. But apart from that as well, I think that we have to also thank the developers as well for giving us a new Bond girl. And that is in the form of Teresa Lorca, who is easily, I think she is going to be the game character of the year, other than maybe whatever character comes along the way in, Grand Theft Auto 6, which is coming out at the end of this year. Other than any character that pops up in that game, she's probably going to be considered the game character of the year. She's going to be the actual best looking character of the year. And I also want to give a little shout out as well to, her design, how they designed her, because most people will be like, oh, we need to make her look perfect. She needs to look absolutely perfect. This skinny sort of like woman, she's not. She is not some like skinny woman, like supermodel type-esque woman. She's normal. She's a normal woman. And I think that that's an incredible feat for, James Bond as a whole, because ultimately we think that he's like, talking to these like supermodels and that sort of thing. And then when you actually see her, getting out of the pool and that sort of thing, you start to see that she's just a normal woman. I mean, the level of detail is incredible in this game. I mean, down to like how her skin naturally folds. Like, I honestly am blown away that they were willing to like create a character that is so, I mean, I don't like to use like body positive, but I mean, I feel like that's what I have to name it. It's a body positive character. And I think that was a huge step up, in my opinion, because they could have just gotten like a supermodel woman who's like, could be like an impossible figure of a woman, and they actually got someone who actually looks natural, which is actually incredible. And I think this is one of those types of games that when I look back at all these games that I've played, the past couple of years, obviously the closest comparison that I can bring up is Uncharted. Uncharted to me is considered, to me at least personally, my favorite game series of all time. I mean, story-wise, music-wise, cinematic-wise, it is a very interesting game that ultimately bridges lines between cinema and interactive, gaming. So I think that the closest comparison that I can find to 007 First Light is easily Uncharted. And for me personally, considering that Uncharted hasn't released a game in the last 10 years, I mean, if you don't count Uncharted The Lost Legacy, which is a shorter game, but still a game nonetheless, if you don't count Lost Legacy, it's been over 10 years now. It's been about 10 years and we haven't had a new installment in the Uncharted franchise. And I feel like it's about time. I mean, we could expand that. But because it's been such a long time, I've been trying to find something that fills that itch, fills that Uncharted feel that I wanted to actually have. And I feel like this is the best thing that I could have. 007 First Light is the closest thing that I could have to that itch being scratched. And giving me a great story, giving me great characters, great cinema, and ultimately making me think of this as like, the next step in sort of like an Uncharted way that games are going. And I really cannot wait to see where they go with 007 First Light and in the future, because I know that they're adding content, they're expanding the story or whatever, but I definitely want to see where they're going to take this, ultimately further into the future. And speaking of taking things further into the future, I do have to open up the conversation. The biggest conversation right now in cinema, which most people could agree is possibly the most important decision that Amazon has on their hands, because if you don't already know, Amazon is the one that owns MGM, and MGM owns 007. So ultimately, you see how things all come together. But the biggest thing that is going through everybody's mind right now is who is going to play the next James Bond. And I understand what you guys are saying. There are lists online, Marcelo. You can go and see them. There's people talking about Callum Turner being James Bond. There's people talking about Aaron Taylor Johnson being James Bond. There's people talking about Henry Cavill being James Bond. I mean, all these names have been popping up. But all of them have a problem. And I think it was one YouTuber that actually brought it up. And that was all of these actors that I just mentioned, and amongst that, other actors as well who have been named, have a certain level of baggage. Aaron Taylor Johnson is the guy who you're going to immediately connect with when you're talking about, Kraven the Hunter, or you're going to be connecting him to Kick-Ass, or any of these other franchises. If you're talking about Callum Turner, I mean, you could talk about him, when he did his World War II series, or when he talked about, when he's doing now his movies. I mean, he could be technically relatively unknown, but when I look at Callum Turner personally, I know he's a great actor, but I don't look at Callum Turner and think, that's the next James Bond. That does not even come close to my mind. I cannot look at Callum Turner and think, he's the next James Bond. It just doesn't feel right. I mean, mind you, he feels like Bond, considering that now he is officially married to one of my favorite artists, Dua Lipa. But he ultimately feels in real life like he could be a Bond. But in the movie doesn't quite cut it for me. And obviously, and that ultimately extends to every other actor. I mean, even Henry Cavill, like I mentioned, people are going to look at him and think, oh, it's Superman. But that was a point that I heard online that made sense, because when we're talking about a person that could easily play Bond in real life, in the movies, there's no other person that I could more recommend after playing this game than Patrick Gibson. Patrick Gibson has to play Bond. Deep down, for me personally, this has to be the only answer we have. And what a great transition would it be that you'd leave this game and ultimately they have a movie coming out and it's him playing Bond. He is perfect for this role. Perfect. I have never in my mind have seen an actor and thought, that guy is James Bond. And for the first time ever playing through this game, I have to say, Patrick Gibson is James Bond. He is the perfect guy to play James Bond in a future film. And I'm telling you, dude, it would be so cool to see him cast as our next James Bond, because ultimately the search is happening right now. As we speak, there are people out there searching for the next James Bond, and I have my fingers crossed that hopefully, they choose Patrick Gibson, because I think that would easily draw millions of people to go see it in theaters. And mind you, this game already has sold a lot of copies, okay? Like, just think about it like this. People who play the game are more likely to go see it in theaters. Now, if you take this and you multiply it by how much a ticket costs, you can kind of see where the budget is going and how much money they would be making. I mean, preliminary-wise, you'd think it's a little bit, but dude, it would be so freaking cool to see that happen. So, fingers crossed on my end, and hopefully they make the right decision and get him to be James Bond. But all in all, this game absolutely blew my mind. This is the type of game that I finished playing and I was like, no. I have to find another excuse to play this game again, because this game is just that worthy of replayability. It's just that good. And honestly, like, everything down from like little details in the story to, little nuances and ultimately the overall experience of being James Bond is here. Like, literally the knob is turned up to like 1,000. It's not even turned up to 11. It's 1,000 here. And I honestly absolutely loved everything about this game, and I could not recommend it enough for people to go out and play. But then again, those are just my thoughts, my opinions, the way I think and process everything I experienced in this game. And honestly, I want to hear from you. What do you guys think? Do you think 007 First Light is an incredible game, a game that is worthy of actually going and playing? Hopefully, you're like me and you love games like Uncharted, and ultimately you want to play a game like this. I know it's been a few months now, but honestly, it is so worth it. It is such a worthy game of going and playing. If you're a fan of James Bond and you've never played a video game in your life, play this game. Play this game. I am telling you, you are going to be impressed and you're going to have an absolute blast. And honestly, that's how I think, and I want to hear from you if you think the same way as well. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when new videos go live on this channel. And thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.
Scrolling through YouTube, same old routine, then bam, movie savant, what a scene. Trivia bombshells dropping knowledge like rain. Forget the dishes, gotta watch it again. Movie buffs unite, savants to place. Subscribe and hit the bell, don't leave a trace. Next level knowledge keeps you in the loop. Savants got the scoop, ain't nothing to recoup.